has been a very busy time. In fact, just yesterday, we voted on 32 bills, one constitutional amendment, one House resolution, and this work was work from 13 committees. We have a lot more to go. And Steve, why don't you kick it off?
And a partridge in a pear tree, maybe. Yeah, we had a very busy day yesterday. Our day started at about 9 o'clock. We had a caucus. The Democrats got together, talked about things. Then we went into the House from 9:30 to about 5:30 last night. One of our longer days. There was lunch and other highlights, but we had some interesting bills yesterday. I actually had presented a constitutional amendment, a bill that calls for a constitutional amendment. It's called a CACR. The number is 19, and it relates very much to our local community, because we here in Plymouth passed not so long ago, about 3 weeks ago, we passed a rights-based ordinance, which was passed by this town and now exists in our town quiver. We are able to use that ordinance to protect ourselves against harm from corporations, and it's based on our ability to protect our health, safety, and welfare. There's a lot of technical words there, like 4 or 5 pages worth of them, but the important thing to know about that is that this ordinance cannot possibly take away any right that we currently are guaranteed by our Constitution, by our laws, by our state, federal, and even international laws. So one of the things that has been alarming to folks and gets them worried is, oh my gosh, are we going to use this ordinance to take away people's guns? Or are we going to take away their right to free speech? And the answer is no, it will not. Now, these are the local ordinances. The problem that we have with our local ordinances is that we do not have any specific constitutional backup for that. That we have rights that are guaranteed to us by our Constitution, individual rights, and roughly we can translate those rights into our ability to have a rights-based ordinance for our town. But it's an indirect link, and it's going to be tricky because most of these things eventually get proven in a court of law. So the court of law is going to pit us against a corporation in a situation where, as we know, Northern Pass, either Northern Pass itself or some other situation where a corporation maybe wants to extract water or to have a landfill, or a whole variety of other things that impact our natural environment and our ability to have a sustainable local future. So the constitutional amendment was an important part of this because it would have, had it passed, which it didn't, sorry to tell you, it would have given us the constitutional power to pass such ordinances. It's hard for legislators to get their head around it. So let me just explain just quickly. I'll try to do this quickly.
Quickly.
Yes. We don't use all the time.
So much to talk about.
But that the constitutional amendment would have needed to have been passed by the House by a 60% vote. Had that happened, then it would have been put on ballots throughout the state of New Hampshire, and it would have had to receive a 2/3 majority in order for it to become a part of the New Hampshire Constitution. It's a very high test and not easily attained. We were able to actually get about a third of the House to vote for this, which is a pretty good accomplishment, I think, for our first year trying it. And the House didn't agree that they should have put it in front of the voters, to the voters for their decision. And I'm not sure I agree with that decision, because I think we the people are, in fact, the people for whom government is formed, and we the people should have the right to to take that up and decide for ourselves whether that's a good idea or not. But your legislature didn't think so, and your legislature didn't choose to put it in front of you as a constitutional amendment. So that's just about plenty on the rights-based ordinance. And let's get along to something else, Suzanne. What do you think?
And we were both co-sponsors on that piece of
Yes,
legislation.
we were. Mm-hmm.
Which, seeing we're on the topic of the rights of the people, why don't we just go right into House Bill 1358. House Bill 1358 was a bill that those of you who have been following the Northern Pass situation for the last 7 years probably realize the Site Evaluation Committee is the state agency responsible for approving or denying large-scale energy projects, and Senate bill and the House Bill 1358 had a deadline in it that if the Site Evaluation Committee took no action on a project, no matter how big or complicated the project was, in 365 days, it would become automatically approved. And as we know here, the Northern Pass project has been in the docket for 2 years probably, because of all the changes the applicant keeps making and all the complications that have come up. So there was concern that we would not be able to kill this bill. The motion out of the Science Tech Committee was ought to pass as amended. And so there was concern that we would not be able to overturn this ought to pass motion. And so a group of bipartisan legislators from Grafton County got together and made a motion, did their work, did their homework, and tabled the bill. So that bill is now on the table, along with many other bills that legislators have chosen not to deal with. Now, tabling is the situation where the legislature votes to put something on the table for a variety of reasons. Either it's not ready for prime time, or no one wants to go on record as being pro or con on the issue, or it's just too controversial and people don't want to deal with it. So in this situation, it was great. It went on the table by about 40 votes, and bills that are on the table can be taken off at any time, but after that crossover date that I talked about earlier, we need 2/3 of the House to vote to take it off the table if it's past the deadline for crossover. So we're hoping that this bill sits on that table and just, rots and doesn't, and nothing happens with it.
We legislators have to learn all these tricks about how to get things like stuffed in a corner or brought out of the closet.
Right.
Or the table, as it turns out.
Yeah, yesterday, in fact, didn't we have a couple of bills that they tried to take off the table, but they're still on the table?
Yes, we did. And so there's some. I think I lost my voice. No, I didn't. Here it is. It's back again. So we've actually had some interesting tabling motions this year. Lots of times, when a bill comes to us that is it may not prevail, but the folks who want it would be really happy for it to prevail, but they're afraid that they're going to not get the result and have to be on the record of showing that they wanted it. That becomes a candidate for being tabled.
Correct.
Right. And I don't know. I don't think it's a particularly attractive idea. I don't like it. I think people should say what they mean. But that's a technique, and we got our rules, and we choose to use our rules. What else,
Yes, we
Suzanne?
do. Well, it might as well continue with the Northern Pass.
Okay.
As most of you, or all of you, realize, the Site Evaluation Committee almost a month ago came out with a ruling that they turned down the Northern Pass and stopped their deliberations, and deemed it was not acceptable because it had not passed one of the major criteria, one of the needed criteria to pass the project. And that was orderly development of the region failed. And all members, 7 members of the subcommittee that was hearing the testimony and deliberating, agreed on this. So Eversource, Northern Pass, filed a motion to have them reconsider their decision. And basically Monday there was a meeting, and since the site another super complicated issue, but since the site evaluation hadn't yet even written their report, they'd only given an oral yay, nay, they made the decision at this meeting Monday that they would not reconsider Eversource Northern Pass's request to reconsider their motion because they hadn't even written their motion.
Kind of laid it on the table, didn't they?
Yeah, they kind of laid it on the table. And so there was, what was really interesting, it was only a 30-minute meeting, but it was interesting because the Site Evaluation Committee discussed whether they should all put it on the table, but in the meantime, they should look at the other two criteria to approve the project, which are in the public interest, and does it affect natural and cultural resources and the environment in a negative fashion? And so they had a discussion about whether they should do this, and the chair of the Site Evaluation Committee made the statement that it's not our role to advise them what to do, so we shouldn't do this work so we can tell them what's missing in their application so that they can fix it. That's not our job. We've been working with, and pretty much it meant we've been working with these people for 2 years and they haven't gotten it right yet, so why should we do this? But so that will come again before the Site Evaluation Committee probably in May, after they have issued their written report and everyone has a chance to review it.
Right.
So
Yep.
Northern Pass is still a no-go.
Most likely it will end up in the courts.
Yes.
Because corporations have these rights, and basically because corporations have rights of personhood. They are the same as you and I. They have civil rights. So they go to court and they say, we've been denied our freedom to have interstate commerce. So we've been denied our freedom to have our freedom of our property rights. So they have their constitutional rights that they go to in their legal process with their vast resources, and it makes for an unfair fight, which is one of the reasons why we wanted the constitutional amendment, so we would be in the same kind of level playing field with corporations for local communities to have some power in the court system. Anyway, sorry to go back to that again, but it's on my mind.
Well, to finish up with Northern Pass, the end of March, Massachusetts will make their final decision whether or not to keep Northern Pass in the running for their renewable energy contract that they're putting together. But with nothing moving forward on Northern Pass, it's debatable whether that will really happen or ever happen.
You want to talk about voter suppression?
Sure.
Oh,
Good
that's
to
a
me,
good one.
Fun topic.
So we, I think it's fair to say that there's been years and years of attempts to try to bring student voters and others who are not exactly like full-time residents into not being voters. I understand the concept on both directions. I mean, as citizens, we actually have that's one of our most dear rights is the right to vote. So that's something we don't want to mess with. And on the other hand, folks feel, well, you shouldn't be voting in our area if you come from someplace else. So usually that question comes down to students. And of course here in Plymouth, it's a very big question because we know that students more likely to vote for one political party than the other, and it can make for I'm trying to find the right word. It can make for a variation in the curve of how the results come out. So the attempt this year to get that under control came to us in the form of a bill that that redefines the words resident, inhabitant, residence, and residency. And that may sound arcane to you, but basically what it does is that it takes in our Constitution says your voting right is attached to your domicile. Your domicile is a separate word from resident. Your resident, to be a resident means that you are, you have a place that you call home. If you own a vehicle, you need to register it in that residence. You have other residency responsibilities. Domicile means pretty much the last place that you laid your head and may have some intention to continue to do so. So that is the test that has been applied to people's ability to vote in this state. You have to be domiciled there. A student who's here, who laid his head on the pillow in Pemigewasset Hall, qualifies as a voter by virtue of his domicile. This bill puts all the definitions together and basically redefines domicile to mean resident. So here's the bad news. The bad news is that if this passes through, it has passed the House, if it passes through the Senate, then what will happen is that if you are a student in this town and you haven't changed your residency to New Hampshire, you come from a different state, then you will need to, after you vote here, you'll need to go to the town hall and register your car in New Hampshire and pay all the fees and become a resident in that form, because if you declare yourself a resident in this state, you have, I think it's 60 or 90 days to actually register your car.
And get a new driver's license.
And get a new driver's license. So it's quite the hassle, and it is. And I think those of us on the Democratic side think that this is virtual voter suppression, and we think that it amounts to a poll tax, which is something that we aren't appreciative of, and we fought it hard, but we were not able to overcome the Republican majority. So it has gone. It has passed the House and has now gone off to the Senate. And if folks are feeling as threatened by it as I am, call your senator, please, because they have an opportunity to make it. The governor has said that he has said at various times that there's no way he's going to support that, and then at other times he said, well, let's wait and see. It's not time yet.
Right.
So we're not entirely sure what Governor Sununu's position is on it.
What is that bill number, Steve?
That bill number is HB 1264.
Good. All right. So contact your senator, and if you're watching this locally in the Plymouth area, your senator is Senator Bob Guida. And his information to contact him is on the General Court website.
Right.
Or you could probably just Google his name and find it. So,
Most likely.
yep. And what about redistricting?
Redistricting is another subject that's really dear to my heart, because one of the things that has happened in this country, and you know about it, is that there has been a lot of activity in redistricting that causes districts to become gerrymandered. All right. Man, I can't go into all that.
Okay, so redistricting is what happens after the census every 10 years.
Right. Uh-huh.
And when state congressional districts and state legislative districts get apportioned according to the number of people in those districts. Mm-hmm. And the towns that are getting redistricted all need to be
broken down into similar size populations. So approximately 3,300 to 3,500 people per legislator in our
state legislative district in New Hampshire
is what's needed. As it turns out, the town of Campton has just the right number of people, so they get one representative. Yes. The town of Plymouth is too big for one, but not not big enough for just two.
Right.
So we get combined with Hebron and Holderness, and between the three towns, we have enough people to divide it equally into
Three.
divisible by $3,500. And that's how Suzanne and I and Travis happen to be your representatives
Correct.
for the three towns, not one for each town, but three people for three towns. So when that process happens, and it happens every 10 years after the U.S. Census, the districts are reframed based on the newly known numbers about the population in those towns. There's all kinds of rules, and of course there are all kinds of different ways of doing it. And if you know how voting patterns are, you can do what's called packing and splitting. Which you can look it up online. It's very
You didn't
interesting.
make those words up, did you?
No. Packing and splitting are the ways that are used by political parties to make sure that they get a larger than average chance of becoming reelected. So-
And the state legislature is who does the redistricting in this state.
Yes, and they do it not only for state representatives, but they also do it for US
Congress and
congressmen
executive council.
and executive councilors, senators too, of course. That represents a lot of power in the hands of one party, because the party is in power at that time, gets to make that decision virtually, and it causes establishment forces to become more established, which to me is not democratic. That is actually the wrong way for us to be going. What we should be doing is getting our government so that it actually represents the people rather than the other way around. We don't want the politicians to choose their voters. We want the voters to choose their politicians. So it's in our system, both federal and state, has been run amok. You may have heard about there's a Supreme Court case now on Wisconsin having to do with this partisan gerrymandering. That's what this is called, partisan gerrymandering. At any rate, getting back to the State House, what we attempted to do this year is, the second year in a row that I've been involved, is to fix the redistricting process so that it becomes nonpartisan, so that it's actually done in a way that levels the playing field, so that candidates don't have to fight against a tide that's insurmountable, and people don't lose their actual their representation because they get put into districts that will never become something other than the party that they already are.
Yeah, I mean, we want the districts to become be competitive,
Right.
in proportion to the people that are in them, not necessarily by towns being moved around so that it affects one party. But unfortunately, we haven't been very lucky with getting these redistricting changes.
Well, this is
done.
this is the problem, because the folks that in power don't want to give it up. So therefore, they don't want to change the system
Yes.
that got them there.
So we had one bill that was an independent redistricting commission, and that has failed, I think, the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
That has been introduced. And then we
And
had
this
a
one
new
is
one
more-
this year.
This one is more interesting,
That
I
was really
think,
interesting, but we
because
don't have much
basic-
time to go
We don't
into
have
the
much time.
details, though.
Oh my gosh. Well, so here's a brief explanation. It takes a backward look. It says, okay, party in power, you go ahead and do the redistricting. But after you get done with it, and after the first election, after you've done with it, we're going to measure to see whether or not you did, in fact, gerrymander that. And if you did, and it's a measurable outcome, then we're going to send it back, and we're going to have a commission that's going to do the job again. The hope is that will cause the party in power to do it
Right, the first
right
time.
the first time,
Yeah.
rather than having to do some back and forth.
That was very good.
Not bad.
Thank you. Only a little bit into the weeds, but these are all very important things. What were the numbers on those bills, if anyone wants to read them?
The redistricting bill is, where is that here?
It wasn't in this month.
It's HB 1666.
Yeah, House Bill 1666, so that's good, that's good. So some of the other things that have been going on, yesterday another bill that was tabled was another attempt, and we hadn't actually had an attempt to pass a law requiring adults to use seat belts in their cars. We're the only state in the country that does not have a seat belt law for adults, and that bill was tabled. So that was interesting. There was no debate heard on it. It was tabled as soon as it was introduced.
Right.
So that probably will not come off the table. That'll be another one that dies on the table.
Right.
Then Medicaid expansion last week was passed by the Senate. Now, Medicaid expansion was part of the Affordable Care Act so that more people would be covered by health insurance, and it's been huge for New Hampshire for the mental health and the substance abuse recovery programs. And over 50,000 people in New Hampshire take advantage of Medicaid expansion. So the House and Senate, in their infinite wisdom or not, have passed a law every couple of years and kept to keep going back to the drawing board. So the Senate passed their version of Medicaid expansion renewal, which will last which will be a 5-year extension, and that was Senate Bill 313, and it uses money from the alcohol fund to pay the state's share so that it will not cost taxpayers anymore. And the most controversial part of their Senate Bill 313 is that it has a work requirement, so that anyone who is receiving their health care through Medicaid expansion will be required to work 20 hours the first year. I think it's 25 hours the second year and 30 hours the third year. And as most of us know, most people who are receiving this low-income-based health care are already working. So it's going to be interesting. And the feds, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, has consistently denied work requirements. And this year we'll see with the new administration, but this would be one of the most restrictive Medicaid expansion bills in the country. So we'll see what happens with that.
I think actually part of that's also disturbing is where the money's going to come from, because the money coming out of the alcohol fund is the very money that we need to fight the opioid epidemic.
Correct.
So here we are. We have competing needs. We have a fixed ability to do anything about it because of our tax structure. And we are making, and we have to choose between whether we want to, it virtually caused us to have to choose between whether we put money towards fighting the opioid epidemic and all the other alcohol-related mental health situations, or do we go to the basic needs of the 50,000 people who need that assistance with their health care? It's a tough choice.
It's
not one that we really should have to make, but we are in the box and we have to make it.
Yes, we
as
do.
It turns out, until you, the voters, get on the stick and tell your representatives that you want to have an income tax. Now, that's not easy either.
Oh, now you bring that in when we're at the end of the 30 minutes, he brings an income tax. We're going to put that one on hold till the next discussion.
Okay, we're going to come back and talk to you about that.
But actually, the Medicaid expansion bill will be coming to the House next, and we'll see what kind of juggling happens there. So we're going to close out for today, but I just want to end on one note, which is the state's 10-year transportation plan passed through the House yesterday. 2 weeks ago, when the Committee of Public Works met, they took out the passenger rail grant that we were going to receive from the federal government, which would study whether passenger rail in the southern part of the state is feasible or not. And yesterday on the House floor, the proponents of passenger rail fought and overturned the recommendation to get rid of the passenger rail by 6 votes. So that was a good thing that happened yesterday for
Right.
those of us who think that rail is not a dead and dying horse
Right.
in the country.
This has been a lot of fun, Suzanne. Don't you
Yes.
love this? The green room.
I'm glad to have a day off.